Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 231 of the Canadian Football Countdown, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network. We're here to preview week 20 in the CFL here this evening. Ryan and Trey here with you tonight. Adam was going to be here, but had to cancel last minute because, honestly, if you listen to last week's show, I think the Riders just broke him, but no, he had a last minute thing come up. But Trey's here with me tonight as usual. How are you doing, Trey?
Fantastic, man. Great. It's a warm day, really warm day, weird day today. We're talking off show about our kids. I know you had a thing. I thought I lost my kid today. Like I didn't, he wasn't there at the end of the school day, and I was so mad. And it's just because he sometimes goes to daycare, so I have to take this van to daycare and whatever. It was a mix up. I found him, but I mean, I just miss the days when kids could just walk to school, like they walk to school, ride the bike. Who cares if their uncle that the teachers never met before picks them up from school? Really? Those were the days when we could play with rusty pieces of metal. But, I digress, man. So other than that, we're good. Almost Halloween, man. You excited? Is this your baby's first Halloween?
It is my child's first Halloween. Yeah, she's going dressed as a strawberry this year.
Ooh, nice. I got my youngest got Spider-Man. My middle one's got Ghostbusters, and my oldest got some guy from Fortnite. So I don't know.
Sounds about right.
About the ages right there.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, yeah, we're going to talk about a bunch of different storylines around week 20 in the CFL this week. We'll make our betting picks for each of the games, and all of the games actually have odds this time around. And try to find some fantasy players to watch. It's tough this week, but we'll find some to talk about in there. We're also live on a variety of different platforms thanks to our presenting sponsor, Game Time TV, which you can learn more about at GameTimeTV.ca or on Facebook, facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB. We'll take your comments, take your questions in the chat throughout the night, so feel free to throw those in there as well. Before we go any further, we do want to acknowledge that the Canadian Football Countdown is brought to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as from Treaty 4 territory, traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis Nation. Also, before we get into the regular programming here, just a weekly reminder, if you want additional content, additional chances to chat with us between episodes, check out the Discord community we've got going. There's a link in the episode description. It's free to join. We've got lots of extra CFL talk, NFL talk, CFL fantasy betting, etc. All of that fun stuff going on there. It is free to join. Just find the link in the episode description. All right, let's preview week 20 in the CFL here, Trey. And it's a bit of an interesting end to the season here schedule-wise because we've got 3 games on the schedule this week. 3 teams are on bye. And same thing next week to end off the season. So final 2 weeks of the season, 3 teams on bye per week, 3 games only instead of 4. What do you think?
It's interesting, right? Like it's a tough one. And I mean, with a 9-team league, you can only do so much, I guess. But, just, I don't know. At least the games don't matter, right? Most of them really don't matter. What, there's 1 or 2, like, first place in the West is up for grabs, and it depends between second and third in the East. That's about it, right? So
the East is we'll take a look at the playoff scenarios as part of this topic here. Yeah. The East is finalized. Nothing can shift around in the East at this point. It's going to be Montreal hosting Hamilton, East semi, and then winner goes to Toronto, and Ottawa is out of it. Out west, it is still a toss-up for first in the West, but a Winnipeg win or a BC loss this week ends that race and has Winnipeg clinching first. Basically, BC needs to win this week and have Winnipeg lose 2 in a row. And then Calgary and Saskatchewan fighting for that final playoff spot. And basically, if one wins and the other loses this week, the winner gets the playoff spot. Otherwise, it goes to next week. And I think Calgary plays Winnipeg that week to decide things at that point. So very decent chance that everything's locked up this week, or potentially maybe we get some interesting football in that final game next week, but it's not looking great.
Yeah, not really. Because again, even next week, let's say Winnipeg loses and needs to win next week against Calgary, who needs to potentially win. Calgary might be going all out, but how hard do you go to get, like, you know what I mean? Are you going to risk a big injury just to get a bye? You have to weigh that, right? So,
yeah, like what's the dream outcome? Because let's take fandom out of this of individual teams. What's the dream outcome this week? I'll give you the 3 matchups. We've got Friday night, we've got Calgary visiting BC. That's at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Then we've got a Saturday doubleheader. The Argos go to Saskatchewan at 4 p.m. Eastern, and Edmonton comes to Winnipeg 7 p.m. Eastern. What is the best case? I think the best case scenario for interesting football here, based on these playoff scenarios, is BC beats Calgary, Toronto beats Saskatchewan, so that race comes down to the final week, and then Winnipeg loses to Edmonton, so that both races out west come down to the final week of the season. Like it's kind of what we got to hope for at this point. Otherwise, next week is going to be, another round of preseason.
Yeah, and it's a weird situation too, because if both teams had full rosters, these all should be blowouts. According to the betting lines, which we'll talk about later too, right? But again, it's how long is Toronto going to start their starters? Will Winnipeg play out? You know what I mean? Like, how long are these guys going to go out there? Because again, how much are you going to risk just for a bye? Or Calgary and Saskatchewan, 100%, right? Should be playing all out. But the rest, I'm like, who? And Edmonton too. Edmonton's a tough one. You're playing for next season. How much can you play for next season? It's football. It's I don't know. It's kind of weird how it's still very interesting, right? Even though the games kind of don't matter. There's a lot to think about.
Yeah, that's what's driving me nuts from the fantasy perspective this week, is figuring out who's going to play the full game the final 2 weeks down the stretch for their respective teams, and who's going to get in for those opportunities. So I think there is still some intrigue in the final 2 weeks of the season, and it is fun late in the year to see some of these guys who have been backups, haven't really gotten the opportunity, get a chance to shine potentially. Because I'll say, going back to last year, we were at the final couple weeks where the games didn't matter too much either, and we saw some guys. One of the guys I remember seeing kind of light it up in the final few weeks of the season that wouldn't have gotten a chance otherwise was Terry Godwin of the Ticats, I believe, last year. Looked really good down the stretch, and now we've seen him be arguably their second best, if not at times best receiver this season, and get more of a chance there. So it is a bit of an insight into these guys that in maybe a different category than we get early on in training camp if you're looking towards next year. But it's not as exciting as it could be, where, it's coming down to this matchup in the final week is going to decide who's, 5 different things for the playoffs, right? And it's unfortunate that we're at that point in the season. And that's why I kind of go back and forth on this 3-game schedule. Is it good? Is it bad? Because do we want another, air quotes, meaningless football game in the final weeks? But at the same time, almost seems like an even slower crawl to the finish line to have 2, half weeks, basically.
Yeah. I don't know. I want to know what goes through their heads when they're making schedules, but I wouldn't even know how to make a schedule with an even amount of teams. I would have to Google it or get some program to do it for me. So I don't even know how they do it with 9 teams and locations and all that. But yeah, 6 games over the last 2 weeks just sounds really weird to me. But I don't know. Because again, one of the best things ever is the last day of the NFL. They're all on the Sunday. Most of them are in the early window. You know what I mean? It's all on. Same with baseball. They start all their games the last day from 2:10 to 2:30. So they're all ending kind of at the same time. And that's crazy, right? That's kind of what you want to see the last few weeks, but not having teams having buys, going into the playoffs is really unfootball to me, but it's what happens.
Hear me out on this. If there's going to be 3 games on the schedule in the final couple of weeks, do one of those triple header Saturdays and have them all on the same day and make a bigger event out of it.
No, that's
normally
true.
I'm not in on those as much because I like spreading it out, but this point, why not? Because it would feel like more of an event. Like, oh yeah, 9 hours of football versus I don't know. It feels disjointed this week.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think like what's really, because the only thing I can think of against that too is what's on, that would prevent that. Like, is there something on Saturday to TSN that's more important than having 9 hours of CFL?
Yeah, good
Like,
question. They've got the doubleheader going already.
That's what I mean, because there is UFC on, to be fair, and I know it's not big, but the UFC, the prelims are always on TSN, and they go till 3. And is that not when the Argo Saskatchewan game starts? So, you know what I mean. So, and there's probably I'm just trying to look to see what's on Saturday for fun, but yeah, I don't know. I see what you're saying. I get a not of an exciting take when with the triple header on the CFL as I do Sunday NFL, right? It's a weird, it's kind of different. You kind of want it spread out, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because then it's a whole week to wait for that, and even it's gonna be sad once we get there with playoffs too, right? Where it's after 2 weeks from now we're down to CFL football 1 day a week. Man, it's sad the season's ending.
Oh yes,
we're almost there. Very close to the end of the season there. But yeah, 3 games on the schedule this week. There are still playoff implications in them, as we talked about. There are potential for more playoff implications to come in the final week of the season. And one of the big ones that, Adam did give us a couple of topics here, and I think we'll go to this one here next, is you kind of touched on it already for these teams, is how do you manage things if it's not fully solidified yet, but you kind of think it's going to be going into the playoffs. And I think the biggest case of that might be for the BC Lions, who play the Friday night game against Calgary. They need to win this week and have Winnipeg lose to both Calgary and Edmonton to clinch first place in the West. You have to think that's probably not super likely to happen. Vernon Adams Jr. did get banged up a little bit in the last game for BC. He has been a full participant in practice all week this week, so it seems like he's maybe a little more healthy now, though. But what do you do if you're a team like BC, where you technically still have a shot to get first place in the West, but it's looking probably unlikely to happen? Do you put VA in? Do you make sure he's healthy for the playoffs and start Dane Evans? What do you do in that scenario?
See, I start the starter. You still have a chance. I think you have to do something. Now, I would reassess. Halftime, you're up 30 or down 30, then that's maybe when you start thinking. If it's a competitive game at halftime, I think you still have to, go for it. I would go with VA for sure, because I don't know. I don't know, because I guess when you think about it too, like, does BC have a bye next week?
They do, yes.
Well, then maybe I'd rest, because do you really, I don't know, 2 weeks off sounds almost like a disadvantage too. So I don't know, does that go through your mind where we don't want 2 weeks off? We'll play the extra game. We still get the home game for revenue sake if ownership is saying something, right? So I don't know. I still think you got to, for appearance sake, at least come out with your starters for 2 quarters, right? And then reevaluate.
Yeah, I think that's from the morale perspective, I think too, and it's not giving up necessarily either. Like, Dane Evans is a capable football player that could probably lead them to a win this week over Calgary as well, and the likes of that. But maybe that does impact team morale a little bit, where it's like, no, we still have a chance here to clinch first place in the West, which I think first place in the West makes or breaks BC's season, to be honest. I think BC at home versus BC, having to come out on the road to Winnipeg, and maybe Saskatchewan or Calgary beats them. Okay, so BC coming out to Winnipeg, is a vastly different football game to me, just based on how the teams play at home and on the road. So I think it's critical for them. I think they have to go for it. And I think the answer to this question is honestly, like, whatever we answer today, the outcome of whatever happens is going to be, in hindsight, this was either the right or the wrong answer. Like there will be a definitive right or wrong answer probably at the outcome of the playoff or this week in the coming weeks. If you start VA in this game and he gets injured and now you got to go into the playoffs without him, well, yeah, that was probably the wrong choice. If, Winnipeg wins this week and it solidifies that you're finishing second. If all of a sudden Winnipeg loses and you have another chance next week, well, then it was the right decision to start VA. So there's reasons it could be the right one. There's reasons it could be the wrong one. And it's going to be a results-oriented, result of this debate.
Yeah. It's that tough thing. Like, I know Ryan or Adam likes to remind us about one of our quarterbacks got hurt late in the game, years ago. But I think at some point, you just got to like tip your cap at that and say, you know what, like life just sucks. Like you can't control it. You and I could just break our ankle walking down the street.
I've done that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We could, anything could happen. The guy could fall out of the bathtub, and not be set to play, and VA could slip out of the shower, and there goes the season anyway. Like it's. I think you're right. I think you got to go for it though. Because again, let's look at it from the other way. Let's say the Bombers decide to rest Claros this weekend, right? As we're Bomber fans, and then they lose and they don't get first. Aren't you and I going to kind of be looking at each other being like, what the hell are you thinking? And it's like when the whole city of Winnipeg's going to be thinking that, because we're not thinking about the Jets, right? So we got to got to be thinking about what the Bombers and what Osh is doing. Now, I don't think Osh would even let that happen, but we would. I think from a whole overall standpoint, you got to go for it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And maybe if it means, because don't we at some point in the season get a little more space on the roster as well off of the practice roster? Is that not a CFL?
It did, but then it resorts back, I thought it was for a while after NFL cuts. And then I saw somewhere that it slightly goes back down again kind of thing. Like you have to pick between the NFL guys or the people you had. But I could be wrong.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking, maybe you start a couple of extra guys so that, you do have the opportunity to rotate them in and out here and there. But yeah, I think for the most part, we're at the point in the season now where these last 2 weeks, if your matchups don't matter that much, use this time to get ready for the playoffs. And that, to me, is teams like Toronto as well. We talked about them rotating guys in and out and resting them. Now I think is the point in the year where you put your starters in and you play top cylinder football down the stretch to get you that momentum going to the playoffs. Now, does Toronto need that momentum when they still had it despite resting guys here and there? Maybe not, but
you're true. That's true too, because you don't want them to sit too. Because if you kind of half rest them this week, half rest them next week, then they get the full bye week off. And then they're going to be playing a team of either Hamilton or Montreal who, played a couple weeks and played hard football and deserve to come in. Like, what does that sound like? That sounds like the story of our lives in the CFL. Sometimes when that third place team just gets a little hotter, they can go on a roll, right? And Toronto doesn't want that to happen just as much as Winnipeg or BC doesn't want that to happen on the other side, right? So, yeah, I think Toronto. See, the only thing that half concerns me is, they not much of a fight, but Saskatchewan's probably like in some ways going to put up a fight where at least next week you have Ottawa who's playing for next year. So if I had to pick one where I would go all out would be next week against Ottawa. If I was Toronto, beat Toronto, you play the provincial rival, you beat the living snot out of them. You feel good about yourself. You beat a bunch of guys who probably aren't even going to be on the team next year, or maybe even the CFL next year, right? And you feel good, and then you take that into the playoffs, where this week you go too hard. Saskatchewan, maybe Adam doesn't think so, but I guess still has a chance, right? So
yeah, so in that battle, talking about Saskatchewan, let's talk about Calgary here as part of it also, because that's the scenario this week. Is these teams played each other last week and both looked absolutely awful. Like, we joked a little about who wanted it less, and it was clear the answer was both of them for large portions of that football game. But Calgary gets the win. They're kind of in the driver's seat now because they've got 2 games left. Saskatchewan's got just 1 here. So I think Calgary's got a bit more of an opportunity. Calgary playing BC, Saskatchewan playing Toronto, like it's do or die time for these teams, right? So which stealing kind of one of the topics off of your list here, which team do you feel more confident in? You know, they've got great opponents they're going up against that, you know, can will themselves into the playoffs.
See, I wrote that thinking Adam was here today. So, but yeah, you know, I don't want to see either of them. You know, I kind of just want to just skip it and go to BC comes to Winnipeg. Like, you know, in the playoffs, does either one really going to look that great? You know, in the playoffs, and like it's weird. Like we look at the standings, I just good chance that you know the East, all the teams could have at least 500 record. You know, Hamilton could get the win next week. You know, oh, that's interesting. Hamilton and Montreal play each other next week, and then they'll face each other the week after in the playoffs. That's kind of going to be maybe an interesting little tidbit we could talk about next week. But like, you know, like I said, Hamilton could be very well 9-9. And then when was the last? Like, I think I did this last time. Like last week, the last time a West team had a losing record in the playoffs was like 07 or 09 or something like that. And it was the Lions. Like, it's weird to see a losing record in the West, isn't it?
Weren't the Bombers in their 2019 Cup run, or were they 9-9?
They were 9-9 or 10-8 or something. I thought because they had a pretty good record. It was just that West was stacked, right? Like, yeah. It was. I'll find it, but it was. Yeah, because then we play.
Because Bombers went into Calgary.
Yeah.
First and then into Saskatchewan.
Yeah, the Bombers finished third at 11-7 behind the 12-6 Stamps and the 13-5 Rough Riders that year.
Meanwhile, now we're looking at it. I mean, the Riders can finish at best 7-11.
Yeah,
and, I mean, both teams can finish at best 7-11 on the season.
Neither team in the West is going to be over 500, and Hamilton at best could be 500. That's wild to me. You know, to think that. You know, for how long have we been saying, oh, the East needs to get better, the East needs to get better? And I mean, if you look standing wise, Montreal isn't too much different than Winnipeg or BC, couple losses, but you know, BC loses one, or even Winnipeg and BC kind of lose and Montreal could win one, they're close. And then Toronto's just the beast right now. It's looking like they're going to be like, what, 15-3, 16-2, something like that. So, man, it's nice to see the East finally kind of look a little better. And they were getting wins against the West too, right? Like it wasn't like they're just beating up on themselves. So what were we talking about? Kind of went on a tangent here.
Well, we were talking about which team, Calgary or Saskatchewan, could kind of will themselves into the playoffs this week.
It's going to be Calgary, right? Because there's still the Patriots of this league kind of crap where they're the team that's somehow going to get in. And like I said, watch. There are two things that are going to happen. It's either going to be Bo goes wild. And is Bo still playing in Hamilton, right? He didn't get hurt again.
He's playing half the time. Weird load management going on.
Bo's going to get hot in November and throw for 1,000 yards just in November. and then he's going to play Mayor in the Grey Cup. And that's going to, it's going to be the big thing. Something stupid like that. It's going to happen. Probably. Yeah. And yeah. So
I think the biggest key that might tip the scales here for Calgary is it looks like Reggie Begelton's going to be back this week. And I think that was the biggest thing they were missing last week against Saskatchewan is that offense just had nothing. He eats up like 14 targets a game at sometimes. Begelton does. And without him, they teamed up on Mark and Michelle pretty well, who's probably their next veteran. And then it's a bunch of really young guys in that receiving core for the Stamps. So maybe having that veteran leadership back for them helps out a little bit. I think the Riders maybe, at certain positions are less of a veteran group there, whereas Calgary traditionally, has a good number of them. So I think it's the time of year where that's where you want those types of guys to step up here, and you're going to have to do something to motivate yourselves to get the victory. Which brings us to the endless saga of Craig Dickinson's continually mystifying press conference comments and quotes, where he has talked about, his team being tough in the playoff race here, deep in the playoff race, Dickinson did quote this week. I'm grabbing this from a 3Down Nation article from JC Abbott. It's going to be a tricky sort of scenario to get the team motivated for this week's matchup. I think we can do it, though. We're going to focus on enjoying being together. We've got another week together, and if we can win a ball game, we make it pretty darn hard for Calgary to catch us. But they do still have the tiebreaker. He then goes on to say, it may be something as simple as just getting in the weight room and lifting some weight, maybe heading into the bowling alley and throwing some pins, do something fun. We're in week 20 of the CFL season with a playoff spot on the line, and the coach goes and says, I don't have one negative thing to say about the team's performance as of late. And the key here is I don't think the matchup itself can get us motivated. We have to go bowling. What?
Does that not sound very Mike McDaniels? But Mike McDaniels would say it in a cool way that everyone would love him. But anyone else says it, he just sounds like an idiot. Like, I don't know what he's even talking about. Is that just trying to like keep pressure off? I don't know. Talk about the stupid thing the coach said so the media doesn't worry about the players? I don't know.
Has that been maybe that's been the strategy in Saskatchewan all along? I get the idea of, I think, a team outing, maybe not away from practice, can help morale a little bit there. But the comment that drives me nuts is not that it's going to be difficult to motivate them already. Like, if you're having a difficult time as the coach whose main job is to motivate the players to be their best selves and design the game plan that helps them be their best selves, if you can't do that in week 20 of the season, why are you even here? Like, I know Adam wanted you to go off on the Riders on his behalf tonight, but I got to steal a little bit of that energy here because this is insane.
I have no idea, man. It's like, again, as wearing the Blue Bomber hat, it's kind of enjoyable watching this. But trying to be a neutral party here on, let's put this hat on for a second. Okay. Why did I get a sudden craving for Pilsner? But it's and watermelon. But I don't know. I don't know. Like, how can you not be motivated again to play for the team that is the Rough Riders? Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, even though it would have hurt my Blue Bomber soul, if you were playing for the Rough Riders, that would be pretty cool. Like, that's a team that you kind of would brag about playing for. It's a decent franchise over the years. Good stadium, just looks like a toilet, and good passionate fans. Like, I don't know what more you want. Lower cost of living, so your $75,000 rookie check actually gets you farther. I just get out there and play. I'm actually like, just looking at the standings and looking at and then these percentages, like, you would have thought Saskatchewan should have 70% chance of getting into the playoffs when they have a game or two lead a couple weeks ago, but they were like 50-50. And I'm like, why? How is that a thing? Like, Saskatchewan they should have been in the driver's seat, but you're feeling almost like Calgary's in the driver's seat, even though they're the ones still technically half a game back. And I just don't know what to me, there seems to be, they're giving me very Bomber feelings when we had, like, during our 29-year drought. We just had the really bad management, and Canadians was falling down, and we had coach, we'll handle it internally comment, all this crap, and just never could have a winning season. And every time a new quarterback comes in, it's Willie Peg. Now, that's kind of what I feel like Saskatchewan is opening the chapter on a little bit. And just for Adam's sake and Rider fans' sake, I hope it's not a 30-year stint, but like, hopefully it's a year, maybe two, and then they're back to kicking our ass on Labor Day consistently, right? So
I think Dickinson's done after this year. I wouldn't be shocked if this organization brings him back again, but I think he's got to be done. Another comment from him a couple of days ago, maybe post-practice, post-game. Adam sent us earlier a tweet from 620 CKRM. where Dickinson talked about wide receiver Tevin Jones and said he has to do a better job at learning the playbook. He's one of my favorites, but we need to see a little more attention to detail out of him. Tevin Jones is 12th in the league in receiving yards right now with 882 through 16 games, including 3 or 4 where he has been a backup. Like, how much more attention to detail do you need from a guy when you're playing your second or third string quarterback on the team that's not producing that well?
Could you imagine? Like that's like the parents telling you need to do better in school and you're already getting like an 85 average. Like what sorry that I'm not honor roll, mom. Like I don't know what more you want from the guy, 12th in the league, and he doesn't know the playbook. Like he doesn't need the play. Apparently your playbook is crap then. If he could do that. Like who's in charge of that playbook when some guy can just come in and be like, no wonder everyone's stopping the Rough Riders because their playbook's easy to learn, I guess. I don't know. But man, what can you do to it? Yeah, he just almost feels like the boat is sinking, so he's kind of taking everyone with him. You know, like, wow, I'm not the problem. It's he didn't learn the playbook. Oh, it's not my problem. We're gonna bowl instead. Like he just kind of, I don't know, trying to save face now, and he shouldn't be doing that. That should be happening next week or the week after when they're eliminated, not this week when they have a half a game lead. Like,
and isn't that what happened last season with Fajardo down the stretch too? Wasn't there a war of words, and all of a sudden Cody was being benched late in the season there, and it's, I mean, some of the sacks he took were his fault. We've seen that problem over in Montreal still too, but a lot of it was the offensive line issues, and he kind of became the scapegoat there. So it's sad to see. It's dark times, seemingly, for the Riders, and it's one scapegoat after the next. And I know if Adam was here, he'd be going off on this as well and talking about how, the change needs to happen sooner rather than later. And I think that's got to come this off season. It's honestly probably too late in the season for something to happen now. What are you going to do? Change coach before the final game of the year? Maybe if you want to get a head start, but...
I mean, if they're if they're eliminated, he's getting fired, right? So even if they have a game next week, I would. But
yeah,
maybe it's just my NFL mind gets kicked in because when teams are eliminated, their coaches are gone, and then it's whoever's the OC is just the intern or interim coach for 2 or 3 weeks, right? So we don't see that too much in the CFL unless the team's like the sinking ship, but then they'll do a complete change, right? So lack of coaches, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But maybe motivate your team with the drive to make the playoffs, because that's kind of what's probably in your job description.
That's how I motivate my kids. Like, oh, you do good today, we'll go bowling. Like, go get ice cream after, man. I don't know. They're all lining up at Dairy Queen outside of Mosaic there instead of practicing, but whatever.
Should we go bowling tomorrow to celebrate a successful podcast tonight?
Yeah, bowling is great. Bowling is so much fun, and it doesn't matter if it's 5 or 10 pin. It's a blast.
I love bowling. Not as much 10 pin, but big 5 pin bowling.
5 pin bowling, the spin you get on those little suckers, man, and just strikes for days. My kids couldn't imagine. I got like 5 in a row last time I took them. They're like, "What are you doing?" But
okay, hear me out on this. CFC live show from a bowling alley. We get, let's community meetup. Get folks come down to the bowling alley. We'll put on a bowling tournament and have a live football show going from there. Let's make it happen.
Sure, there's some bowling alley dumb enough to let us do that.
We'll work on it. Probably not happening, but if it does, you'll hear about it on this very show. All right. Storylines, anything else we want to talk about here with a little bit of time left? Do we want to talk about ticket prices a little bit? Because that was a topic we were going to discuss last week that we didn't get to very much there, which, there were a couple of things. The Edmonton Elks are closing the upper bowl for most games next season, trying to bring the crowd in a little tighter because the attendance has been going down there due to the home losing streak. Yeah. You've got the Riders have been hiking up the ticket prices despite nobody being happy with the team's performance lately. Yep. But then you've also got some positives where the Argos, and I don't have the numbers on this in front of me. I'll try to find the numbers here yet, but they've done very well. all things considered, for Toronto attendance so far this season. Let's see. Yeah, tweet here from John Bender at John W_Bender. The Argos have increased their attendance by 21% over last season and had their best attendance in 7 years, which is very good to see there. The Bombers are about to, sell out 4 straight home games or something like that now this week against Edmonton. It's going to be another 30-something thousand person crowd. So it seems like attendance, ticket sales, ticket pricing is up and down across the league. I don't know necessarily where I want to go on this, but what do you think about some of these numbers or situations we're talking about here?
I don't know. I'm getting kind of like everything's going up, right? Like we see it in all the leagues, but to some degree. But then there was $10 playoff tickets available in Minnesota for the Blue Jays Minnesota game. That's wild to me. But then we're selling tickets. Like I was just trying to find a extra ticket for this week's game, and there's some for $30 in Winnipeg, which those were not bad. But then you have to think about it too. That's okay for the single guy who wants to go to a Bomber game and have some beers at the Rum Hut. But then, like me, family of 4, the $30 turns into 120, 20 for parking, 20 this that. It adds up, and it's such a crazy world too, where we live in. What's $1.60 for gas right now, and it's just the prices. I think they got to try to focus. The big thing the CFL needs to do is stop making it such gate driven. And I think that's number one. And either somehow getting a little bit more TV money, getting more sponsorship, something that it's like the next pandemic happens, we can actually have games without crowd, something like that. But attendance-wise, like what they're doing in Edmonton, I was kind of Googling something. I couldn't remember if Edmonton was still in the running for the World Cup when it's here. So I was wondering if that's maybe low-key that, but they're out of that running. So it's not to that anymore. So I like it. That's one of the biggest stadium in the league, probably. I think isn't something crazy for what it was built. Like it was built for the Commonwealth Games, right? So it's something crazy. It'd be cool to see that thing full again. On to Saskatchewan. I mean, man, I guess canola prices are good if they think they can charge more. I don't know. Like, is that like Adam has to dip into his into his rainy day tractor breaking down fund to get season tickets next year now? It's crazy. I can understand it to a degree when teams are winning and stuff, or it's a commodity, right? Like if Bomber prices go up, well, it's stock and demand, right? Like whatever. And then did you say Toronto's went up, right? Is that what it was this year?
Yeah, Toronto's has been their best in 7 years.
That's good to see. I like to see that, but does performance have a little bit to do with it? Sure. Pinball is probably a little bit more of a better face to promote it the last couple of years. And again, that one I think is a big thing too, because they also, if you care about what other things are happening in the city, their soccer team is crap this year, which shares the stadium. Their baseball team, we don't want to talk about it. We all know the Leafs are going to take over now. But in the summer, what else do you have, right? If TFC isn't doing good, so that's where I think it's good because again, Toronto is one of the ones that's hosting World Cup games in a few years. Like I think the attendance is really going to matter because you might have a chance where Toronto doesn't have a home game for a month, or something weird, right? That because of FIFA coming in, so having the attendance build now, I think, is really good for them.
And I have to throw BC in here too, right? Like they've opened the Upper Bowl a couple of times as well, and Amar Doman has done a fantastic job there with the Lions of turning that experience around with the. And a lot of it is, I think there's 2 things that drive people to the stadium. Okay, I'll put 3 things in here. The biggest one is winning, right? Like you are much more likely, if you are a fan, to go to a game if your team is doing well than if it's, am I really going to pay this much to go watch them, get blown out and maybe not. The other part of it is the game day experience, whether you are a diehard fan or more of a casual fan. Maybe you want to just go party, do something, hang out with friends and, grab a couple drinks and watch a football game. And if the game day experience is good, that's going to drive a lot of people to come back just for the casual event and something to do, part of it as well. And then the third is ticket prices and making it affordable. And so I think that all plays into things. And I think that kind of correlates to what we're seeing here. Like the Argos are successful, the Bombers have been successful the past couple of years, and I think that's really turned the attendance around there. BC's been successful, and the game day experience, from what we've heard, has been pretty good in a lot of these places. Whereas, Edmonton, it's gone down quite a bit, and the losing streak helped there. Even Calgary, all of the talk of them needing a new stadium so badly, and I've heard just the game day experience has been declining there as well. And that's all leading to less and less people going. So I don't know. It seems like for two guys, at least for myself, who has no sort of business or marketing background, like the recipe for success here seems really easy at a high level to me. And clearly some teams have figured it out, but other teams are struggling.
I think it does have some effect on the market too, because BC's a weird one. They're not quite like a traditional Western team, but they're not quite Toronto. You know what I mean? They're kind of weird in the middle where it's a big city, they got other things going on, but when the team shows up, the fans show up, right? Like it's one that's, we always seem to clump Vancouver in there with Toronto and Montreal, right? But then you got Calgary. The one thing I liked about Calgary, it was a very good party scene. When I went to the game, they had a guy, like we have our PA announcer, right? But they actually had a guy who was like some radio guy walking around on the microphone, and he would like, let's get loud, Stamp. Like he would be hyping it up, almost like the guy on the side of a concert hyping up the rapper about to come out. And it was a cool experience. But yeah, the stadium wasn't great. Getting there wasn't great. They're wooden, or they're like it's a high school stadium. It's the seats, the bench seats, right? It's not
right.
It's not what we have anymore. So. And their team's not doing well. And Bo's gone. And when Bo was there, they weren't doing good. It's the changing of the guard a little bit. But what other than the team, what do we do that's so... I was thinking about this the other day. What do we do that's really like, oh, you got to come... Like, if it's not for the football and not for this, you got to come to the Bomber game. Just because we're loud and the fan... Like, is that kind of our thing?
I think the tailgating in the past couple of years has grown and been pretty good. Like they have the official tailgate, and then they let you tailgate in the parking lot. And I'm seeing more and more kind of groups pop up here and there for that. I'm not a tailgater myself. I normally go in and walk laps around the stadium. So if you're ever there, make sure you're walking in the same direction as me, and you might find me. Otherwise, you might not around the stadium. And I think it's just the way the stadium is constructed. It leads to a lot of just social goers, right? Like you look at the ticket sales, and oh yeah, it looks like a sellout. But then you go to the stadium, and it's halfway through the first quarter, and you look up at the seats, and it doesn't really look like they're filled at all. And then you look at the concourse, and just everyone's standing around and chatting and having a good time. It seems there too, right? So. I've never been to any other stadium besides this one and Old Canada Inns. Like I haven't gone to any away games yet, so I don't. I don't
talking about that stadium today. That's weird. I was talking about a game at that stadium today.
Yeah, so I don't have the context of what it's like at these other stadiums, but and the Bombers have different things as well. I think they've done some good things there with. What do they have? I think they have drinks and hot dogs, maybe cheaper before kickoff up to a certain point. They've got their food item, a different food item every game that's kind of featured there. Like it's all these little things that add up. The ability to go on the field after the game and run around on there. And I'm sure a lot of these other different teams have these various things there as well. But I think the game day experience helps. I think the winning is probably the biggest thing that's impacting things. Because look at the Jets, right? Compare the Bombers to the Jets, and I know you were talking about it this week, even that there's a Jets game on the same day, and the Bombers are still selling out here.
Exact same time, and I know it's an away game, but I was thinking I just remember when the Jets moved here, everyone was like, "Oh, once it's October, no one's gonna want to watch a Bomber game." You know what I mean? Like every time there's a Saturday Jets game, if it's home or away. Saturday hockey night. I even pay attention. Which night's hockey night in Canada? Saturday?
It's Saturday.
Okay, Saturday. So I mean, if it's hockey night in Canada, you might have people, oh, you know what? The Bomber game is on, but I could stay home and watch the Leafs game and then watch the Jets game after. You might have a lot of that. And but yeah, it's crazy. But also the Jets prices went up, which we were, to tie in what we've been talking about, because we have to pay more if we don't want them to move back to Atlanta, right? That's what I think. That's what Chipman said. But
was Craig Dickinson giving that press conference? Because that sounds like something he would say.
But actually, I have to say one thing. The Bombers are doing great marketing too. I don't know who my parents know, but they know someone in tickets, and they've been offered free tickets to the last 3 or 4 home games. And they've taken some of them, and they said no this week because they're like, we don't want to go just in case it's too cold. But I was like, who do they like? My parents lived in the city for like 6 months. I've lived here for 10 years. How the hell do they know someone to get free ticket? But so it's all on like little things like that. You know what I mean? Giving free tickets to people. It just shows it's more than just like one free ticket, but hopefully that person buys 10 beers. You know what I mean? Like, so
that's exactly what it is, right? And that was that whole Elks ticket scheme this year of the guaranteed win seats that the folks who bought those got into like 8 games for free or something, or probably not 8 home games, but a couple home games for free. But then how much are they spending in food and drinks when they're there, right? Is get somebody in the door. Ticket prices are not the end all be all of revenue. It's the starting point for you there. So that's why, I'm not a business major, but, the lower the ticket price, the more people you get in the stands, the better the atmosphere, the more people that want to come to the game, the more people that are going to go spend their money while at the game. And that leads to success. So it's interesting to me that it's kind of, turned upside down a little bit in the CFL, where places like Edmonton and Calgary and Saskatchewan that you wouldn't think so are now struggling, and places like Toronto and BC, who got flack for so many years for their struggle to fill a stadium, are now 2 teams that are clearly on the rise and thriving in that regard. So it's exciting to see those teams turn it around, and just hoping it's not going to get too bad for these other teams out here. Last topic before we get into our betting picks and our fantasy picks here is Canada's boy, my future CFL Hall of Famer, namesake for my NFL fantasy team. Nathan Rourke has been elevated to the 53-man roster by the Jacksonville Jaguars after Trevor Lawrence has been a little bit nicked up and missing some time in practice. They've got a backup in place who they were clearly high on, the Jaguars there, but Rourke is on the roster. You think there's any chance he gets into playing time in the next little bit here?
If Beathard and the other guy get hurt too, I can't imagine. It's all precaution because the Jags had back-to-back weeks in London, and then I learned a lot apparently. So you have the choice when you're told you have an international game, you have the choice to take the bye the week after, or you could say, no, we'll take it later like normal. The Jacksonville Jaguars took it late. So they had a home game last week, and now they have the Thursday nighter. So London, straight to home, Thursday nighter. That's a Thursday nighter against a division rival. That's a tough little skid, right? So I think you probably don't want to go into that with 2 quarterbacks if Lawrence is out, right? So that's my thoughts. It would be great to see him play. He played great in preseason, but
Yeah, I'm not expecting him to get in for playing time, but he is elevated to the roster. And just pulled up a tweet here from Farhan Lalji that this isn't a standard elevation to the roster, which teams can do up to 3 times a year from the practice roster. They've actually signed him. So there's a good chance he remains on the roster for a few more weeks. As long as he dresses at least 3 games, he accrues a year, which means at least $900,000 next year. So, even if he's standing there holding the clipboard, all of us who are questioning, was this the right decision for Nathan Rourke to go down south or up here, potentially making, 1.5 times as much money as he was going to make probably in the CFL this season. So
chew up those pension games too, like we were watching Strevy try to get last season or whatever, right? That's big.
Yeah.
So. and then you have NFL pension, then he can come back to the CFL, then it's fine.
Yeah, I would love to see him play at some point. I'm hoping we get there at some point this season, but the road to get there, meaning the 2 guys ahead of him have to get injured. Well, given the trend of things in the NFL, that will probably be by next week. We'll be talking about Rourke being the starter.
And then I was thinking too, if the Jags weren't good, you know what I mean? If they were 0-6 right now And then that could seem more like reason to pull the guys ahead over injury, right? They'll be like, "Well, this guy's throwing nothing, so we'll see what the kid can do," right? But because they're competitive, they're the top team in their division. Oh, the Saints aren't in their division. What am I thinking? Saints are NFC South. I said there was a division game, but still, teams that should know each other.
I can never keep the divisions.
No, it's AFC South and NFC South cross division or cross conference here, but still, it's a tough little skid. So, but I think Trevor Lawrence will play. This is a big game still, so.
Yeah, I think so as well. But, anytime Nathan Rourke does anything in the NFL, it's going to hit all the CFL news cycles.
Right.
So we got to talk about it as well. This is step 1, 2, maybe 3 on his on the road to NFL Hall of Fame for Nathan Rourke. I miss watching him play.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to think that he's not technically really playing, right now. So.
Yeah, that's the sad part of it. You can't blame a guy for going down south and chasing the dream there, even if it means you got to, do your time, so to say, to work your way up to it. But missed opportunity to see a guy like that playing at the top level he was for longer than we got to. But happy we got to experience it for that 1 year. It was exciting times for sure. All right, let's get to betting picks for this week's 3 games on the schedule here. Do you want to talk about, in general, the betting lines this week? They're a little crazy, aren't they?
Yeah, they're wild. They're all big ones. But then when you look at them more in depth, where are they? I closed our notes. That's okay. But they're all.
I got them for you. If you
they're all big, right? So. I'm on.
Yeah, BC's 8.5-point favorites over Calgary, Saskatchewan, or Toronto's 9-point favorites over Saskatchewan, and then Winnipeg's 11-point favorites over Edmonton. And this is before any depth charts come out either.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. And then it's weird that all the teams that I don't want to say don't have to try, but all the teams that have already clinched a playoff spot have this huge line over teams that aren't in it or fight. It's kind of weird. Like, I'm almost surprised they're that big because we were just talking about Toronto might be 9 points better on a normal game, but if they're starting their, resting guys or taking the foot off the gas and Saskatchewan's actually trying, are they 9-point favorites? It's kind of weird. And same with Edmonton and Winnipeg. Like, Edmonton's got nothing to play for, but Winnipeg's also like, well, we could also just win by a field goal and we still clinch home or the bye, right? It's not. We got to give Castillo some chances in there too. They're weird lines, but if we want to, I guess we have to pick them.
We got to pick them. That's what we're here to do. So we'll start with the first game, Calgary at BC.
Full disclosure, this is a week that I call the 1-800 number and say I have a problem if I bet on this week because you just stay away from it. But, we have to do it. I'm probably going to take all the teams to cover. I'm going to take Calgary. I think that even though BC is probably a 9-point better team, they're probably going to Sorry, I was reading Richard's text, and I thought he said he was at karaoke really quick, and I was like, well, why did you even come to this show if you're at karaoke? But now I see it karate grading. That's awesome, man. But I think I'm going to take Calgary because they got something to play for, where BC does, but like we were kind of talking about earlier, how hard are you going to play for the bye, where Calgary's playing for their life, right? That's where I'm going to go. And I'll go over. I think there'll be big points this week, Ryan.
Should we add karaoke night to the bowling alley party we're planning?
Man, I have such bad ADHD. I can't. I usually have our private chat open so I don't let that distract me, but I had it open by accident, and here we go. And now I know Rich is black belt. Yeah, Eddie. Yeah, I'm tired. Yeah. I play too much Spider-Man.
I feel you on the tired thing. We're getting through it here. Calgary, BC. I don't know. I think BC, like we talked about earlier, is still gonna try hard in this game, obviously, to get them set for the playoffs here.
And I'm not saying BC by any means or Winnipeg are gonna just mail it in, but I'm also kind of like, at halftime, you're sitting there, you're starting to get a little sore. You're like, okay, we're up 10. Do we need to win by 11? Oh, we got to make sure, or, we got to make sure we beat the spread this week, boys. I don't know if they're going to be thinking about that, right, in the trenches fourth quarter. So that's kind of.
I'm still going to take BC at home this week, I think. I just don't trust Calgary to get the ball moving. I don't think the offensive game plan has been good. Last week, they were facing the Riders, who just don't have a run defense right now, and they gave Kadeem Carey the ball like 8 times in that game, which is just not acceptable, especially with Bagleton being out. So even if BC sits people late, maybe Calgary comes back to cover, but I got to take the Lions on this one. And I think I'm going to take the under by a little bit, just because I don't know how many points Calgary puts on the board.
I see it. I'm breaking my number one rule. I usually don't take a underdog, like even with it has to be a huge spread for me to take them, even if I don't think they will win. But I'm breaking my rule because I don't think Calgary is going to win this game. But like I said, touchdown late, you might see BC, when it's a 55-yard field goal or something like that, they'll punt it. You know what I mean? Like, they don't really need that extra field goal or accidentally give Calgary that situation in field. But, we'll see.
I hope they go for the field goal. I need it for
now
fantasy
you need
points
it
in our draft league. But
I'm the one too that I won an NFL bet last weekend because of that safety late. The Patriots, they were down 2 and then they got sacked for a safety and the line was 3.5. So I'll take anything I can get. I understand that, but it's interesting. We'll move on.
Calgary, second game here. Toronto visiting Saskatchewan. Argos 9-point favorites, over under 50.5.
Wonder how they decided if Saskatchewan got the early game or Winnipeg got the early game on Saturday. But, anyway, I like this one. Again, it's kind of the same thing. I'm like, is Toronto, if they're up a touchdown, up 10 at halftime, how pedal to the metal are they going to go? I'll take Toronto in this one. I was going to say I was going to take all the underdogs, but I'll take Toronto because Adam hates the Riders. There's no way they're going to lose by less than 10, right? And I'll take the under.
I'm going to take Toronto here as well, and the over, actually, because, we've been talking about how the last part of this season just doesn't matter for Toronto, right? Their last 6 games of the year. Well, the 4 of those they've played so far, despite talking about potentially resting starters, they put up 4. Last week, they put up 40 and won by 13. The week before that, they put up 35 and won by, I'm doing quick math on the podcast. That's dangerous. They won by 23. They won by 10. They lost to the Bombers in that one where they didn't start Kelly, but still put up 21 there. And then they beat the Ticats by 15 and scored 29. So the Argos themselves have been putting points on the board, and they've still been covering the spread in a lot of these recent games. So I still got to go with them on this one.
I see the logic. I was hemming and hawing. I'm just kind of more in that spot where I could see Toronto putting up 30, but Saskatchewan putting up 10. Right. So
yeah, it is a high over under, and I always get nervous when it hits around the 50 mark, and I tend to take the under on those. But I don't know, the Argos are putting points on the board in bunches all season long. So
no, I agree with you. And then we got the finale here. Ooh.
Yeah. Edmonton at Winnipeg, Bombers -11, over under exactly at 50 on this one.
I'm not going to win because if I take the Bombers, they're going to lose this game. And if I take the Elks, Bombers are going to win by 40. I wanted more over under how many picks will Caleros throw. I'll talk about that one. But you know what? Let's take Winnipeg with the -11. Again, I'm changing slightly. Sold out crowd. They still have something kind of to play for. Edmonton's all but packed, right? So with that, and you know what? I will actually go with the over. Because I think Edmonton will still put up some points. We got, Trey Ford in a pretty potent offense, right? He'll do some damage. It'll be like that Dolphin Miami Denver game where Miami put up 70, but Denver did put up 20. They could have beaten a bunch of teams that week. Kind of thing, right? So I'll go with that. What about you?
Oh, yeah, another tough one here. Winnipeg and Edmonton. I'm trying to look at what were the previous scores. Winnipeg won 38-29 and Winnipeg won 28-14. I think that one was. Oh, they play each other. This is the fourth time they play this season, actually. They won 28-14. Was that one? One of these ones was the Drew Brown weird comeback. I think that was the most recent one. And then earlier this year, a 40. Oh, wait, that was last year. Never mind. So I'm looking at the schedule on Google, right? So I searched Winnipeg Blue Bombers schedule, expecting it to show me this season's games, but apparently I can scroll all the way up back to like 2018.
Yep.
So they have played each other only 3 times this season.
Okay, yeah. I didn't think any of the West teams played each other 4 times.
Yeah, they might not. I might have gotten that one wrong.
That was
Winnipeg's much better at home. I think I got to take the Bombers here at home to cover the -11, and I'm going to take the over on this one as well because I think they could put some points on the board. And Edmonton can put some points on the board too. I mean, that Edmonton-Montreal game last week that I was so sure was going to hit the under, they hit the over in the first half or something stupid like that. So
how about just quickly throw this one at you? The Bombers alone point total over under is 30.5.
I'd go over.
Over. Yeah, I like that one. And Edmonton's is 18.5. So I might even go the over on that one too, but I don't know.
I think I would, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you got over bonus. Look, good thing you guys tuned in. You came after karate because you just got bonus content right there.
Usually, question in the chat: over under on kick return yards in the Sask Toronto game. I mean, I don't have a number. Obviously for those, but you got Javon Leake on one side, Mario Alfred on the other. There's got to be at least one kick going back for a touchdown in that game.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get into fantasy picks for this week in the CFL. And it is a tough week to make the fantasy selections with only 3 games on the schedule, 6 teams to pick from, and we've kind of talked about already. There is a lot of up and down, like how much are these guys going to play? How much do we trust guys? Let's start with quarterback here. Like Calgary and Saskatchewan, neither of those quarterbacks inspire me right now. VA is question is if he is a little bit banged up, how long does he play? Zach Collaros, if BC somehow loses Friday, how long does he play in there? All of these question marks come to mind. I think the top option for me this week is honestly Trey Ford at $9,000. He's averaging 20 fantasy points a game on the season, which is very impressive. I also think he gets a guaranteed workload. Like if we're talking about playing for next season, if you're Edmonton, are you not playing Trey Ford in these final 2 games of the year? Like Taylor Cornelius, are you going to put Cornelius back out there? You've seen what he can do. Maybe you put Jarrett Daggy back, in for a game, but I think you run with Ford and make up for the lost time you did early in the season. So I expect him to play the full game, which means this is a safe pick and it's a pick that delivers. And mobile quarterbacks against the Bombers normally perform pretty well. So I think there's good Trey Ford potential there for some rushing yards, at least on that one. The other option I would consider at quarterback is still Vernon Adams Jr. They still have something to play for. I'm concerned, about the workload after injury, but he was a full participant in practice all 3 days this week. He's averaging 22.4 points a game on the season outside of the week he got injured. And he has been a top 3 quarterback for this last 6 weeks. So for me, in a smaller week, smaller options to choose from, those are probably the only 2 guys I'm considering this week.
You took both mine away. Like I can't see anybody else because is that Cat in the chat? Yeah, they never sit Collaros, but they should bench him. But other than that, I think I agree with you with Trey Ford. If he doesn't play the whole game, I don't know what Chris Jones is doing because they have nothing to play for. But you got to get him out there and get more experience, more snaps, right? And Cornelius is not their guy. I think they should get rid of that contract as quickly as they can too, right? So you took everything I got, man.
Yeah, and Chad Kelly, I mean, again, how long is he going to play for? That's another question mark there as well, where I try to stay away from the Argos, honestly, at this point as much as possible for the most part when it comes to fantasy picks there. And yeah, Mayer against BC, Dolegal against Saskatchewan. Sure, if you want to save some money and go elsewhere there at quarterback. But I think Trey Ford at 9,000 is a pretty good discount. And with rosters I was playing around with, can get you a pretty good total there. And again, if that's the rest of the field at quarterback this week, I'll put a guarantee on here that Trey Ford is finishing as a top 3 quarterback on the week. Like,
I was gonna say too, and you got the classic Bombers bend don't break defense, so he could chew up a lot of yards and run a lot.
Like obviously you want to get the top guy every week. That's the dream.
Yeah.
But if you can get a guy finishing top 3 at most positions, you're gonna have a pretty darn good week. So that's the Ryan guarantee for this week. Trey Ford, top 3 quarterback. Watch me be wrong. Let's talk running backs here. That one's a little maybe more open here, but 2 guys I really like. Brady Oliveira at $13,500. Like, I don't know if they're sitting Oliveira, especially if you and I are both picking BC to win and assuming they're going to win. If you're Winnipeg, you would much rather put pedal to the metal this week and beat the Elks, lock up first place in the West Division, then rest guys or play them for a quarter or a half against Calgary the week after. I think Oliveira plays almost the whole game unless it's a big lead late and Augustine gets in there. And Oliveira has just dominated fantasy all season. He is a fantasy cheat code. He's been the top scoring running back in 4 of his last 5 games. He's been a top 3 running back in 9 of his last 10 and has scored over 23 points in 5 of his last 6. Also facing an Elks defense that gives up the most running backs on the season. So I think Oliveira's lock it in, no question.
Can I ask a quick question before you tell me your other guy?
Yeah.
Do you ever remember Harris sitting late in the season, even if we were up big or in playoff contention?
On the IR, yeah.
Like, well, he's not, yeah, but if he's healthy, he's playing, right? He was playing for like on our 2019 run and all that stuff, right? Oliveira will play.
Yeah, O'Shea's not one to if there's an ounce of a meaning to a football game, O'Shea's going to put his guys out there as well, right? So I like Oliveira there, and I like Jamal Morrow at 10,500. Here's my other option for the Riders. He's got back-to-back games over 20 points. Whether it's him or Frankie Hickson, the starting running back for the Riders has been top 4, I believe, in 5 of their last 6 games. And 2 of the guys that have normally finished ahead have been James Butler and Devontae Williams, who are both on a bye this week. So chances are Morrow is going to be one of those top running back options this week once again as well. He averages the 3rd most carries in the league this season with 12.8 and averages 3 targets a game. So, Morrow's been playing pretty well lately. And even though the Riders haven't been finding success out there necessarily in the standings, Morrow has been on the stats sheet. The other options you really have to consider this week, no cheap play, Jaquan Hardy from the Lions, because looks like Taquan Mazel is healthy and ready to go again. So maybe you look at him against Calgary. I could see that potentially being a decent play there. Kevin Brown had a big game against the Bombers, but he has barely gotten the ball as of late. And then Calgary, it's always, who's getting the ball the most between Carey, Mills, Logan. It's a bit of a mess going on there. And Toronto, I just don't know. AJ Ouellette was a full participant in practice, but was scratched last week. And how long does he play? If he plays, it's a good match against the Riders, but how long does he play? Does McMahon get in there? That could be a cheap value play potentially. But I think the safest bets for me are Oliveira and Morrow if you can fit them both into your lineup. What do you think?
Yeah, you took the 2 guys I have set up in my lineup already. It's kind of hard. I agree. I stay away from Toronto. And you're uncertain with Calgary, right, and Edmonton. So I would stick with Oliveira. Like, I agree 100%. I can't see him coming out unless it's a big lead or slight injury, kind of thing. Like his ankle's a little sore. Okay, take him out. But like I said, the run game you got to build momentum in, right? So he's going to be there. And Morrow, I think if Saskatchewan has a chance to, if they, the one thing they got to do is to get the running game going, right? And then that's what you got to do at this time of year.
Now, wide receiver is a little more difficult to gauge here,
Yeah.
and this is honestly the position where, like, I try to prep some of these stats and these notes for these each week, but it's been a bit of a time crunch lately. And normally, I get through the quarterbacks, I get through the running backs, feel confident about those, and then I'm scrambling to try to find the wide receivers, and it's even more so this week because, again, talking about the 6 teams playing. You look at Winnipeg, I think sometimes it's hard to tell who's going to be the guy. Dalton Schoen's been missing some practice time this week, so we could see maybe Janarian Grant, maybe Brendan O'Leary-Orange, or not Janarian Grant, Greg McCrae is the one I'm thinking of. Either of those two get into a spot in the lineup there. Maybe that's a value play there, but Schoen has kind of been the leading guy. If you're going to go with a bomber receiver, I'd probably recommend Kenny Lawler. I mean, 7+ targets in 3 of his last 4 games. He doesn't always catch most of them. That's part of the problem, but he, is probably going to get a heavy dose of targets and is known for those big plays and the touchdowns. Nick Dembski's fallen off the map. He's got under 8 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. So I don't know if I trust going there. Like, if you go with a Bombers receiver, I think it's got to be Lawler potentially this week. Toronto, I have no idea what you do with at wide receiver. Like, last week, if you had the guts to start Navaris Daniels, you got 26.1 points out of him. Congratulations. But also, what led you to decide to do that? Because he had finished under 8 in 4 of his last 5 games before that. So he could put up a huge total. He can put up quite the dud of a week. And everybody else for the Argos, again, DeMonte Cox, he had 0 last week. Sometimes it's Brissett, sometimes it's Unger, sometimes it's Neal. I don't trust any of them, really, to be the lead guy. The only thing I guess that's a positive for them is they normally only have like 1 or 2 backup wide receivers dressed, so the guys are playing the full game, right? That is a benefit in that category. I'll touch on the riders here. I'll go 3 teams and I'll flip it over to you for any thoughts, and then I'll come back to the other 3 teams here at wide receiver. The Riders are one of those teams where they have good options again, but it's hard to fully gauge who the top option is because it's kind of a hit and miss up and down. The ones I maybe like the most there would be Sean Bain still gets himself a pretty solid target dose. Every week he had 9 targets, 103 yards last week, but he had some down weeks there. He does cost a lot. I think Jareth Stearns is my favorite rider option currently. He's a cheaper value play. He's $4,000, $5,000. I got him in my lineup currently, $4,800, and 8 and 7 targets in his last 3 games. So he's getting the volume for still a cheap price, and that's probably the Riders receiver I'd look at the most this week. What are you looking at wide receiver here to give me a bit of a break?
From the teams you were kind of talking about, I don't know. I'm feeling Schaefer Baker has been so quiet, and I've been saying for a while he needs to do something. And to me, he's a guy that if the Riders want to make the playoffs, probably need to lean on a little bit, right? So if you're going to go with the morality play and go with the heart over the head, I'd go with him. Bombers, I hit him in hot. I was like, maybe you get lucky in Lawler but Schoen's kind of banged up. But maybe Lawler or someone gets a big 80-yard play and a touchdown and gets you some points. But I wouldn't go there for the consistent production. Who's the other team you talked about?
Toronto.
Yeah, that's another team I kind of stayed away from too. Like maybe go with one of their guys if you're hoping for one long bomb kind of play to get you, 10, 15 points or whatever. But I wouldn't go there if you're expecting you're hoping a guy gets, 10, 20 pickups a game, right?
Yeah, for sure. And just going to some of the questions here in the chat, does Oliveira get pulled if they're losing big? Maybe.
Define big. Define big too, because if they're because 14-point comeback, we had a former Winnipeg base running back overcome that, right? So, and then again, define big, maybe you kind of slightly pull them because you're going to be passing more if you're down.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, I could see that.
But he gets involved there also.
But he does. You're true. It's true. But then you also, it's a freaking too much like wealth of riches there. Like he could, you're down big. You're probably looking for Lawler, Schoen, kind of Dembski. But then, yeah, you do have a guy in the backfield that could do it.
Yeah, there's a question about Sean Bain here as well. I kind of mentioned him. He had a good week last week, and he does play left slot back against the Argos this week, and that's a good matchup that I've normally picked against. But he's been so up and down. Like he had 17.3 last week, 22.7 back in this week 15. But other than that, since week 10 onwards, everything else has been under 10 points. So at that price, it's not really worth it to me. And what is the weather in the Peg this weekend? I believe on Saturday, I was just looking up the weather report. It's 13, high of 13 and cloudy currently, according to my phone's weather app. Going to the other teams here we haven't talked about. Let's see, Ottawa's on a bye. Montreal's on a bye. Sadly, Montreal and Hamilton are on byes. No Tim White, no Tyson Philpott this week. Those have been go-to staples in the lineup. Who else do we have here? Edmonton. Edmonton's tough to take a wide receiver as well because Trey Ford just does not throw a ton, right? Like, what are we at for pass attempts? So the last two games he has attempted more passes. He's attempted 31 and 30 in his last two games, so that is going up. Makes me maybe look the Elks direction a little bit more. There, I do like Kyron Moore generally as a high volume receiver. He's in that Reggie Begelton area where he's going to get a lot of targets and a lot of catches that go for 5 to 7 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And he picked up a couple touchdowns last week, but I don't know if I'm spending big on an Elks wide receiver necessarily. And if you need a really cheap value play, maybe it's Gavin Cobb, who's gotten into the starting lineup there. And has had 8 targets and 5 targets in his last 2 games. Also believe he might be a Winnipeg native. I think he's from Winnipeg and playing back home. Let me double check on that. No, he was born in Victoria, but he did go to the University of Manitoba. So there we go. So maybe there's a little extra edge there for him.
I knows the stadium, or who are we talking about? Yeah, knows the stadium.
Yeah, for sure. The other 2 teams playing this week, Calgary and BC. Reggie Begelton should be back in the lineup, and I think he's a strong candidate to pick this week because, like I said earlier, Begelton was so dearly missed by that team last week, and if everything's on the line for a playoff spot now, you're going to lean on him. He is the veteran presence. He's the best player on this team. I expect him to get 10-plus targets in this game. So I like the play of Begelton, and he's a guy who can put up 40 points or can put up 29 points in a game and make or break your fantasy week there. So he can also put up 7 like he did in his last game, but chances are it's probably going to be on the higher end if they can get that passing game going. I also think it does open things back up for Mark and Michelle, who still got 8 targets last game, but was pretty well covered on a lot of them because they didn't have to worry about Begelton. These are the 2 veteran presences, Begelton and Mark and Michelle on this team, and I expect them to lead the team if they're going to have any sort of success this week. So they're the 2 guys I'd consider there. BC drives me insane. That's the best way to put it. There is so much talent there at wide receiver there, and any of these guys will finish in the top 5 receiver on the week, but you never know which one is part of the problem, right? One week it's Rhymes, the next week it's Hollins, the next week it's Keon Hatcher. So it's up in the air every time. Part of me wants one of them in there. Part of me wants to just take the chance that I have the right one, because if I'm right, they'll put up a big total. But it's also disappointing when they don't, right? If they don't, then they're putting up 5 points, 7 points. That's not going to help your lineup at that price either there. So I don't have a real preference, honestly, between any of the Lions receivers. Hatcher is questionable to play this week, which makes picking Hollins or Rhymes more intriguing. But each of them are hit and miss kind of every single week.
Yeah.
Who has the best matchup among them would be, looks like it would be Keon Hatcher at left slot back if he's starting there. That's kind of where I'm at for these other three teams: Calgary, BC, and what was that? Edmonton. Anything there to catch your eye?
I was kind of thinking Mitchell too on Calgary. That Calgary BC game, I'm kind of interested in the receivers because again, Calgary's got something to play for. So somebody on that, in the perfect world for Calgary, someone on that team's going to have a good game if they're going to make the playoffs right in their head. So you got to try to pick the right person, right? And it's kind of the same thing for BC. Someone in that receiving core is going to have a good game if they want to have a chance to take first, right? So I took Hollins. I heard you say the name. I'm not gonna lie. I was double check. I was trying to get a new defense in our NFL team or fantasy real quick. So I missed if you said Hollins, but Hollins and Michelle are kind of my guys in the team we talked about. Edmonton, again, Trey Ford's got to throw it. If we're willing to take Trey Ford, you're thinking he's going to have to throw it to somebody, right? But
I'm more willing to just take him based on the rushing ability.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, right? So he unless I'll watch 2 or 3 Edmonton receivers have the top scores of the week or something, but he's probably going to run for those first downs.
Yeah. With the BC receivers, in our draft league, I've got both of my 5 receivers on my roster. I've got both Hollins and Rhymes. I've put the wrong one in my lineup for like 4 straight weeks. Right. And I keep, adjusting to the other one, then I get it wrong. So if you want to believe in that superstition, go with Dominic Rhymes this week because I put him in last week and Hollins was the right answer. So maybe that means Rhymes is going to be the right answer this week. I don't know. Let's talk defense. There's only 6 defenses to choose from here. And I think the best option, if you can afford it in some way, is the Toronto Argonauts defense. They have been putting up points in bunches all season long and are consistently one of the top defenses across the board. Last week, they were the top one. The week before that, they were the second from the top. 4 or 5 of their last 6 games have been a top 3 defense in the CFL, the Argos, and they're one of the few teams that I think can put up, double-digit points regularly as a defense, and they face the Riders, who have struggled offensively quite a bit lately there as well. So I think the Argos are the best defense choice at $10,000. As for the other ones on the list this week, Saskatchewan super cheap, but they've been hot garbage lately. Maybe the Elks at 5,500, if you want to go cheap, just because Collaros does throw those couple of picks or they do have those couple of fumbles a game. There could be value in taking the Elks defense that cheap as well, but I think if you're spending close to the top, like Winnipeg, BC, and Toronto are all within 0.4, like $400 separating them, you might as well pay for the Argos because they're the best option there.
Yeah, I agree. I can't fit them in, so I went with BC, to be honest, just because, again, I think if I can't take Toronto, I think they would be the second best defense, maybe have a good day in my mind. I don't like Winnipeg because I think Edmonton, the bend don't break defense, Edmonton could pick that apart. And then I did think Edmonton's, I like your comment, Collaros was going to probably throw 3 picks on Saturday, but I don't want to be cheering for that. So you'll hear me from my section, man. Yeah, no, there's fantasy points.
Of course.
But anyway, when he throws 3 picks, I'll be mad when I didn't put Edmonton in there too, so can't win.
Yeah, that's the danger of rotating lineups. All right, just to round things out here, let's go through some results and matchups for our fantasy leagues. Well, there aren't really matchups to talk about because all of our leagues, at least our head-to-head leagues, wrapped up this week. You, me, and Adam were playing all season long in the CFL Podcast Fantasy League. against a number of other podcasters out there. And it concluded this week, and yours truly has captured the championship belt this season. I did go head-to-head in the finals with Steph from the Go Stamps Go show, and I did pick up the championship win this week. So, I was the founder, the commissioner of the league. I've been right there for a couple of years in a row, and happy to finally get that championship belt. And along with it, we did raise some good money for charity as part of this as well. So get to donate that charity prize to the Children's Rehabilitation Foundation here in Winnipeg. So honored to, get the title, even more honored to be able to donate that to a good cause, which is near and dear to my heart. And yeah.
Congratulations, man. Yeah. Finally got the monkey off your back, eh? You got the win.
Yeah, now we got to run it back next season, right?
Boy,
so, training starts now. Over in our Discord league, that also wrapped up this week, and we had FM Fan and Josh M going head-to-head in the finals. It was a very, very close matchup, but congratulations to FM Fan in our Discord community for capturing the championship title there as well. Very well deserved. He went on a run, first place in the regular season, went on a run in the playoffs, got the job done there. So we're working on something. We're working on something to get him a bit of a prize for there, and we'll see. Maybe we'll unveil that in the next week, hopefully. Once I get that all sorted out. But shout out to our Discord community because they're good at fantasy football.
They're all right. Yeah, no, they punked us.
Yeah, we look like a bunch of chumps.
Yeah.
I think I'm 7th in the overall scores in the league out of 12. Out of that
second in points. Like in both leagues we were in. It's wild.
Well, that's how Adam feels in our NFL league as well. So.
Man.
And the wonderful week continues because in the draft league, with our preseason draft teams and tinkering rosters along the way, I have finally passed Mike once again in the overall standings. 112-point week for myself. Trey, you had the second best at 79 points. Mike was at 60. Adam was at 52. And I have pulled ahead of Mike by 16 points with 2 weeks to go. And this is where it gets interesting because 3 teams on bye, and that each week really messes up these rosters.
Yep.
But we'll see what we got to do. Got to go for the championship. Do I care about keepers for next season? Heck no. I'll fire sale the whole team if I have to win in the next 2 weeks. But excited to see how that plays out. And I think you're firmly in third at this point.
Yeah.
Adam's going to catch you. That being said, watch him somehow catch you in the final 2 weeks of the season. Make it interesting, at least, hopefully.
Yeah, it seems like our fantasy league is like the actual CFL. It doesn't really matter much, right? So,
except for that one matchup at the top of the standings.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I want to beat Mike so bad.
Yeah, well, that's me in NFL football, man. I want to beat him so bad, so we'll try to both beat him this week. Okay.
Yeah, deal.
Yeah, we'll break it. Oh, we'll just crush his spirit. 0-2.
Want that title, as much as the big podcast network win, like this is our league. I ran the table with Nathan Rourke last season. I got to run it back this year after some rocky points of the season.
Yep.
All right, let's get into wrapping things up here today because it is that time as per usual. Where are the social media slides? Look at me being prepared.
Attaboy.
Yeah, there we go. I'm crushing that one regardless.
It's not like, what'd you say? This is episode 170 something. It's not like you've practiced this before, Ryan.
It's not like it's not the practice side of things. It's the lack of time to make sure everything's up and running.
No, it should be second nature, man.
I should just have a computer with this stuff running on it and then just never touch that in between episodes and then log in and have it all ready to go.
Pretty much. That's, you know what? That sounds pretty much just have a 24-hour a day, 7 hours or 7 days a week CF podcast like show channel.
Are you trying to kill me?
No.
No. That's the dream if there weren't a million other things on the to-do list and if life things in the way as well. I would love to do this full time, but that's a dream. All right, let's wrap things up. We'll be back again next week. Same time, same place. Last regular season preview of the year. Week 21. We'll talk through all the games that matter, all the games that don't. Next week, and then after that we'll start getting into playoff mode, which is very, very exciting. In the meantime, check out the Discord community if you want extra chatter and content in between the episodes. The link is in the description for that. You can follow us on X at CF Countdown Pod or on Facebook.com/CF Countdown Pod to interact with us there. You can find me on Twitter at CooperTrooper42. Mike is also there at Mike Garrell. Adam's there at Adam Stewart1. And Trey, where can people find everything you've got going on?
On the X, you can find me at Trey Harness Link. Yeah. I haven't been tweeting much lately. I don't know much to tweet about. I don't know. Haven't anything to complain about, so I guess that's good.
That's good.
Or come chat with me on there or the Discord. This weekend we got football, both leagues, UFC this weekend. I'll probably talk some horses. It's near the end of the season, so crazy stuff happens sometimes. So a lot of money to be made out there. So yeah, come check me out there or the Discord.
The Jets will probably do something that disappoints you.
I laughed so good when I saw that they lost 5-1. And stupid me took a tie in that game. Why did I think that they would tie that? I don't know.
What?
Oh, because a tie in hockey is if it goes to overtime.
Oh, okay.
So you get the tie, and then it doesn't matter. So I took it. There'll be a. Thought it would be that, Rich, I've had this mic for. Was something wrong with my mic? Because I've had this mic for ever.
No, I think he just likes the placement of it. It looks.
Oh, is it good?
Looks professional. I'm still rocking my $20 headphones here.
Yeah, well, because I kind of get to do this as a job all the time, but I have to talk about horses, man. I'm getting sick of looking at horses. Let's just move on.
All right, whatever podcast platform you're listening on, we appreciate if you do all the fun things such as like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, share the show with your friends, help us grow the show. We always appreciate that. On behalf of Trey, I'm Ryan saying thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.